Hi, my name is Rachel Carter. I am 27 years old and currently living in Boston. A few weeks ago, I finally walked across the stage to receive my degree in environmental technology, a dream I had been forced to put aside for 8 long years. At 19, I had to drop out of college because I could no longer afford the costs, and I thought the dream of graduation would remain a wound that never healed. Yet the day I should have felt the proudest became the most bitter memory of my life. At my own graduation dinner, in front of relatives and friends, my father stood up and declared that my career was nothing more than a filthy job, unworthy of the Carter family's name. He bluntly announced that I would not receive any share of the family's assets, that everything would go to Sophia, the younger sister who had always been treated like a precious jewel. My mother sat beside him, nodding in agreement. I stood there, holding my diploma in my hands, yet deep inside it felt as though I had just been erased from the Carter family tree. I know some of you listening to my story might understand that feeling, the feeling of being rejected, humiliated, and cast aside by the very people who gave you life. Have you ever experienced such a moment? When you achieved something, but your family twisted it into shame. If you've ever been dismissed or looked down upon, let me know where you're watching my story from. I want to believe that out there, I am not alone. I was born into a family that, from the outside, looked like the perfect picture of success. The Carter family owned a long-standing chain of hotels across New England, old brick buildings with elegant facades standing proudly in the heart of wealthy towns, welcoming thousands of summer tourists each year. To the neighbors, my father was a successful businessman, my mother a refined socialite, and we, the two Carter daughters, were the proof of a distinguished family. But that was just the polished mask meant to impress outsiders. Behind the doors of the white-fenced mansion with its rose garden, my life was dictated by a harsh order. All the light was reserved for Sophia, and I was nothing but a shadow. Sophia was 2 years younger than me, yet from childhood she was treated as the family's treasure. My parents were endlessly proud of her delicate looks, her polished manners, and most of all, her early fascination with business, a perfect reflection of my father's dream of a successor. I remember vividly how, when we were children, he would sit with Sophia every night, telling her stories about the first hotel my grandfather built, about how the Carter name became a legacy. Sophia's eyes would shine with excitement, hanging on every word, while I sat in the corner, feeling like a spectator at a play written entirely for my sister. The bitterest part was that no matter how hard I tried, my parents refused to see me. I was a top student, always near the top of my class, and I had been accepted into a prestigious university to study environmental science, a field I had loved since I was a child. I still remember designing recycling projects in high school or volunteering with friends to clean up beaches, and the joy I felt knowing I was contributing, however small, to protecting the planet. That joy meant more to me than any gift. But in my parents' eyes, none of it had any worth at all. When I sat in front of them, holding out my acceptance letter and asking for financial support to pursue the field I loved, I truly believed I had a chance to prove myself. But my father only gave a cold laugh, his voice sharp as a blade. Don't waste money on trash collecting. If you study business like Sophia, we'll pay. But if you insist on following that filthy path, you're on your own. My mother sat beside him, not objecting, only nodding in quiet agreement. Those words fell into the vast room like a verdict. I still remember the wave of humiliation rising to my throat, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall, forcing a smile as if nothing had happened. I tried to survive on my own, working part-time, borrowing, saving every dollar just to stay in school. For the first 2 years, I juggled classes with jobs, waiting tables at a restaurant, babysitting for neighbors, even scrubbing mall floors during overnight shifts. I believed that if I endured long enough, one day my parents would recognize my efforts and finally offer support. But reality was harsher than I ever imagined. Tuition and living costs were overwhelming, and the debts piled higher each semester. By the end of my second year, I was forced to do the one thing that shattered me: submit my withdrawal form. I left the dorm in silence, carrying nothing but an old suitcase and the crushing sense that every door had slammed shut in my face. Meanwhile, Sophia lived in a different world. My parents spared nothing for her. When she was accepted into an MBA program in New York, they immediately paid her full tuition, rented her a luxury apartment in Manhattan, bought her an expensive car to get around, and sent her a generous monthly allowance. Every weekend, my mother boasted to her friends that Sophia is the pride of the family, while my father could hardly contain his pride when speaking about the future heir of the Carter hotel chain. As for me, my name was rarely spoken. At family gatherings, whenever someone asked what I was doing, my father would dismissively answer, "She's still wandering around, nothing worth mentioning." I must have asked myself 1,000 times. Why me? Why am I not valued the way Sophia is? What did I do wrong to be treated like an outsider in my own family? Through my entire childhood and into my adult years, I never received an answer. I only knew one thing. Inside the Carter house, the place that should have been my safe haven, I never once felt like I truly belonged. Those injustices slowly carved a lasting pain into me, but they also became a silent source of strength. I swore that one day, I would prove them wrong, that my career was not filthy, and that my worth would never be defined by their contempt. But at that time, I was only a 20-year-old girl, forced to pack away her dreams and step into the world with empty hands. And it was in that darkness that I began the first steps of my own journey toward independence. When I dragged my old suitcase out of the dorm in my sophomore year, I knew I would never return to my parents' house in the Boston suburbs. I had already endured enough cold stares, dismissive words, and the feeling of being treated as a burden. I chose to go in a different direction, even though that direction offered nothing certain except a cramped rental room and the little money I earned from manual jobs. I worked as a waitress at a small Italian restaurant near the city square, each shift running from 4 in the afternoon until midnight, my shirt drenched in sweat from rushing between tables. During the day, I took cleaning shifts at a shopping mall, pushing a heavy mop and breathing in chemical fumes that made me nauseous. Every paycheck barely covered rent, cheap meals, and a small payment toward my student debt. Some nights, I sat curled up in that tiny room, the dim yellow light casting uneven shadows on the walls, asking myself if this was all my life was going to be. Yet life often takes its sharpest turns in the smallest moments. One day, while helping with a beach cleanup, a habit I had kept since high school, I came across a group of students testing a plastic recycling project. They used a small press to turn discarded plastic bottles into crude building materials. Curious, I joined in to lend a hand. By chance, a volunteer filmed the process and posted it on YouTube and TikTok with the caption, "The janitor girl helping turn trash plastic into building bricks." The video unexpectedly went viral, reaching hundreds of thousands of views in just a few days. I could hardly believe that the image of a tired girl with chemical stains on her clothes could make so many people pay attention to an environmental story. That moment sparked an idea in me. If one random clip could spread so widely, why couldn't I turn it into something real? I started learning how to film, edit, and create content. I launched a personal channel to talk about environmental issues in a way that felt simple and practical. I shared tips on easy recycling at home, explained why waste separation mattered, and showed how to turn kitchen scraps into fertilizer. At first, only a few dozen people followed, mostly old friends. But gradually, the videos began to spread. I had nothing but sincerity and a genuine love for the environment, and perhaps that was exactly what reached people's hearts. After 2 years of persistence, my channel had gained hundreds of thousands of followers. I was invited to small green entrepreneurship seminars, and local schools began asking me to speak to their students. More importantly, I started to find a community that believed in the values I pursued. Many viewers messaged me to say they had changed their daily habits, started sorting their trash, reduced single-use plastics, or joined cleanup groups. Each message felt like a quiet encouragement, reminding me that the path I had chosen was not meaningless, even if my family still dismissed it as a filthy job. From creating content, I began to dream of something bigger, turning recycling ideas into a real business. At 24, together with a few like-minded friends, I founded GreenPath Solutions, a startup dedicated to researching and producing building materials from recycled waste. In the beginning, we worked out of a rented garage, using outdated machines that broke down constantly. I remember freezing winter nights when the whole team huddled together against the cold, experimenting with formulas while sipping instant coffee to stay awake. Little by little, the first bricks made from recycled plastic were born, sturdy enough to build a small wall. At first, GreenPath was just an unknown name, but with the support of the community, we started raising funds. I launched a crowdfunding campaign online, telling my own story from being rejected by my parents to building value out of waste. To my surprise, thousands of people contributed, not only because of the product but because they saw in us a belief in a sustainable world. The money raised was enough to buy new equipment, rent a small workshop, and hire more workers. A year later, an environmental fund in Boston noticed our project and decided to invest. That was the turning point, transforming GreenPath from a fragile startup into a recognized company in the recycling industry. As the company grew, we secured contracts with several construction firms to supply recycled plastic materials. I began to earn a stable income, rented a comfortable apartment of my own, and for the first time in my life, I no longer had to worry about every single bill. I also made it a priority to hire young people who had faced hardships like I once did, giving them the chance to work in an environment built on respect and creativity. Watching them grow each day, I felt as though I was finally building the kind of family I had never truly had. Then, when GreenPath had finally become stable, an old thought returned. I remembered the unfinished dream, the college degree I was forced to abandon at 20. I realized it was time to close that wound, not to make my parents proud, not to prove anything to Sophia. I needed to finish it for myself, for the young woman who once cried in a tiny rented room, believing her life was already over. So I reapplied to the university and registered to complete the credits I had left behind. Returning to campus, I was no longer the 19-year-old student I once had been. I was older, more grounded, with real-world experience and a career of my own. I sat in lecture halls, listening to professors explain new technologies in the field, and I felt every cell in my body light up. I submitted research papers on recycled materials, using data from my company in my thesis, and received high praise. My classmates saw me as an example, and my professors respected my perseverance. On the day I walked across the stage, I wasn't just Rachel Carter, the 27-year-old who graduated late. I was living proof that a detour can still lead you to the finish line, that no one has the right to decide the value of your life but you. I held the diploma in my hands, my heart racing, and in that moment I whispered to myself, "At last, I did it." That graduation day, I hoped it would be perfect, a milestone to close the chapter of hardship and open a new path forward. I organized a small celebration after the ceremony, renting a cozy restaurant by the Charles River, decorated simply with green and white ribbons, the colors I always associated with the environment and renewal. I wanted to invite the people who had walked beside me, friends, mentors, professors, and even though I felt conflicted deep inside, I still sent invitations to my parents and to Sophia. Part of me wanted to show them that, despite everything, I had risen, that I had completed the very education they once ridiculed. Another part of me, fragile and hidden in my heart, still longed for a small acknowledgement, a nod of recognition from them. Guests filled the room, each one smiling and congratulating me. Old friends from my first college, colleagues from GreenPath, and even the professor who had guided me through research all raised their glasses in my honor. In that moment, I felt I truly had another kind of family, people who believed in me and in my worth. But then, when my parents walked in, the atmosphere shifted instantly. My father, still in his immaculate suit, carried himself with the grand posture of a hotel magnate. My mother, draped in an expensive coat, scanned the room with cold, sharp eyes as though this space belonged to her. And Sophia, my sister, arrived like the star of the evening, in a glamorous dress, her perfect smile gleaming, her self-assurance radiating with the arrogance that had been nurtured all her life. At first, I tried to keep things cordial. I walked up to greet them, smiled, and thanked them for coming. My mother nodded dismissively, my father only gave a curt grunt, and Sophia hugged me with a chill so obvious it felt more like duty than affection. I was used to it. I turned back to my friends, letting them take seats at the central table, the very spot I had wanted to save for myself and my professors. But even as I tried to ignore them, I couldn't have predicted how quickly the cruelty would arrive. While the dinner was underway and everyone was lifting their glasses, my father suddenly stood. He cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the room. I thought he was about to say a few words of congratulations for his daughter's graduation, as any parent would. Instead, each word fell like a cold blade. I want to take this occasion to make it clear to our family and relatives that Rachel will not have any share of the Carter family estate. All of our assets, the hotels, and the reputation we've built over generations will be handed down to Sophia. She is the one truly worthy of carrying on this legacy. The room froze. I sat in shock, my glass trembling in my hand. I could hear my own breathing quicken, as if the world around me was fading away. I tried to tell myself I had misheard, that perhaps he would follow up with words of pride for me. But then my mother rose, her tone sharp and cold as she added, "Rachel, you already have your own career, your own company, a good income. Sophia is the one who needs support. It's only natural. We just want things to be fair." I didn't even have time to respond before my father gave a cold laugh, shook his head, and said something I will never forget. "The truth is, we never believed in that so-called career you're chasing. A filthy career, a dirty job dealing with trash, something no one in the Carter family would ever want to be associated with." The room fell into silence for a few seconds, and then the murmurs began. I saw some of my relatives glance at each other, nodding, and then they started clapping. Clapping not for me, but for Sophia. The applause grew louder, followed by cheers of "so well deserved" and "Sophia is the true pride," echoing through the room. I sat there, in the very place I had paid for, but I was cast out of the spotlight in my own graduation celebration. I looked around and saw my friends frozen in shock, a few of them trying to comfort me with their eyes. But the isolation was undeniable. Sophia sat proudly, smiling as though the entire event had been organized in her honor. My parents held their heads high, satisfied with their performance. And me, I sat alone, feeling as if 1,000 knives were piercing my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand why they couldn't acknowledge my efforts, even just once. But my throat locked tight, and my heart weighed heavy. In the end, I just took a deep breath. I lifted my gaze, letting the fire of rage and pain burn openly in my eyes. I wanted to etch that moment into my memory, to let it become a source of strength I would never lose. I said nothing. I let the silence wrap around me. Silence, but it was a vow, a wordless oath, that I would never forget, and I would never again allow them to define my worth. That night ended with laughter and congratulations showered on Sophia, while I walked out the door with a bleeding heart. Yet I also knew that in that exact moment, a part of me had died, the part that still longed for my parents' love and approval. And when that part of me died, another version was born, stronger, fiercer, and ready to face whatever waited ahead. A few months after that haunting graduation night, I had slowly fallen back into the rhythm of my daily life. Work at Greenpath kept me busy with new projects, new clients, and the steady belief that I was building a solid path of my own. And yet, just when I thought I could leave the pain behind me, the past came rushing back uninvited, crashing straight into the middle of the night. That night, the clock had just struck close to 1 in the morning. I was drifting in and out of sleep after a long day when my phone rang insistently. On the screen appeared a name I had long stopped expecting. Dad. My heart tightened for a second, part surprise, part irritation. We hadn't spoken since the graduation dinner. And yet here he was, calling me in the dead of night. Something in my gut told me this could only mean trouble. I picked up. On the other end, my father's voice came through, not arrogant, not commanding as it always had been, but laced with panic. "Rachel, are you there? We're in big trouble." I sat up, switched on the bedside lamp, and listened as his words shattered like broken glass. He explained that the family's flagship hotel in Newport had just been hit by a massive storm. The roof was badly damaged, water had poured into the grand ballroom, and the estimated repairs would cost nearly $150,000. Normally, insurance would cover most of it, but Sophia, as the newly appointed head of finances, had signed the wrong type of contract. The policy didn't include coverage for natural disasters of this scale. In other words, none of the damage would be reimbursed. I sat in silence, emotions churning inside me. This was the direct result of putting all their trust and power into Sophia, the pride of the family. My father let out a heavy sigh, and then spoke again, his voice caught somewhere between authority and pleading. "Rachel, you have a company, you have money, you can manage this. Help the family just this once. Sophia is young, mistakes are natural. But if the hotel isn't repaired, Carter Hotel's reputation will collapse. Family comes first, you must help your sister this time." I tightened my grip on the phone, the memory of that graduation night flashing back in full force. The cruel words still echoed in my mind. Filthy career, no share in the inheritance. A bitter smile tugged at my lips, one so sharp it hurt even me. My voice was calm, but every word carried weight as I replied. "Father, I was once cut out of the inheritance, once called the daughter chasing a filthy career. And now you want me to save the very thing you were so proud of, when on that day you stood before our relatives and erased me from the family. If you need money, why not sell one of those luxury hotels? You always said they were your pride." The line went silent for a few seconds. I thought maybe he would reflect, admit at least some part of the truth. But no. His old self came roaring back, his voice sharp and furious. "You really are an ungrateful child. We raised you all these years, and now when we need your help just once, you refuse. How dare you, ungrateful." I drew in a long breath. My heart ached, but at the same time, it felt colder, steadier. Softly, I answered. "You chose Sophia. You declared to the entire family that I was no longer part of it, so don't call me ungrateful. I'm simply living the place you put me in." And with that, I hung up, firm and final. After the call, I sat motionless in the quiet apartment, the only sound the steady rain tapping against the window. A strange mix of pain and relief rose in me. Pain because even in crisis, my father still saw no value in me beyond money. Relief because, at last, I had found the courage to speak plainly, to refuse, instead of carrying yet another burden that was never mine. But I knew this wasn't the end. A family so steeped in pride and favoritism as the Carters would not easily accept rejection. That night I closed my eyes but could not sleep. Deep down, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The next morning, as I returned from Green Path with files still in my hand, I froze at the sight in front of my apartment door. 3 familiar faces I least wanted to see: my father, my mother, and Sophia. They hadn't called, hadn't warned, they had simply appeared as if my home was still theirs to walk into. The moment she saw me, my mother stepped forward, her high heels striking sharply against the hallway floor as though to announce her presence. My father stood behind her, arms folded, his face dark with anger, his eyes glaring. And Sophia, she stood in the middle, her eyes red and swollen, clutching her purse tightly, looking both miserable and afraid. I sighed, unlocked the door, pushed it open, and said coldly, "Whatever you want to say, come in. But don't expect me to make coffee or tea." They stepped quietly into my small apartment, not wide or luxurious like the Carter mansion, but the only place where I truly felt safe. My parents glanced around, their eyes carrying a hint of disdain, while Sophia sat down on the sofa, her head bowed. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice tried to sound gentle, but I could hear the urgency pressing beneath each word. "Rachel, your father already explained last night, the family is on the brink. You have a company, you have resources, and $150,000 isn't that much for you. If you don't help, the hotel will collapse. The family's assets, the honor we've built for generations, it will all be gone. She paused, as if waiting for me to soften. I sat across from her, arms folded, staring directly into her eyes. A bitter wave rose inside me. Years ago, when I begged them for just a little help to continue my studies, even a few $1,000s was called wasteful, throwing money into something meaningless. And now, $150, 000 was spoken of as if it were a feather's weight, simply because it concerned Sophia. My words came slow and sharp, each one like a blade. When I needed support to keep studying, you said no. When I was mocked, called the daughter chasing a filthy career, you stayed silent. And now you dare to stand in my apartment and say $150,000 is nothing to me? I'm sorry, but I am not an open wallet for you to drain whenever you please. At that, Sophia broke down crying. Tears streamed down her face, her shoulders trembling. She lifted her gaze toward me, pleading. Sister, I was wrong. I wasn't careful when I signed the contract. I didn't mean to. I know I dragged the hotel and our parents into this. Please, just save me this once. I promise I'll never make another mistake. She reached out her hand, desperate, as if hoping I would take it. For a fleeting moment, something in me stirred memories of us as children rushing back. But then I remembered the times she smirked in satisfaction at our parents' favoritism, the victorious gleam in her eyes whenever I was pushed aside. I drew in a long breath, fixed my gaze on her, and answered coldly. Sophia, consequences are the price everyone must pay. Each person is responsible for their own choices. I have no obligation to save anyone here, especially after what you and our parents have done. The air in my apartment grew so tense it felt ready to explode. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming like thunder. You are nothing but ungrateful. You're just a failure we picked up and raised. Without this family, you'd be nothing. Don't forget who fed you and raised you. His words came out like venom, his face flushed red, his eyes burning into me with fury. I stayed seated, but inside me, rage erupted like fire. I remembered the nights I scrubbed floors alone, the coins I scraped together to pay tuition, the times I stood outside a store watching Sophia receive a luxury car from them. I remembered every insult, every time I was called filthy. And now, they dared to say I was nothing without them? I rose to my feet, standing face to face with my father, my eyes locked on his. You're wrong. I don't need this family to define my worth. I stood up on my own, built my company with my own hands, and finished the dream you crushed. If there's anyone here who is nothing without the Carter name, it isn't me. The room went still. My mother froze, Sophia sobbed through hiccups, and my father staggered back, too enraged to form another word. I walked to the door, swung it wide open, and motioned firmly. Out. When they didn't move, I said again, my voice sharp and final. I won't say it twice. Get out of my home. Slowly, reluctantly, they rose, carrying with them a humiliation they had likely never tasted before. My father muttered curses under his breath, my mother tugged Sophia's arm, and my sister turned her tear-streaked face toward me, but I felt nothing anymore. As soon as they stepped outside, I slammed the door shut. The echo thundered through the hallway like the final punctuation mark to every tie that remained. I stood there, my back against the door, my heart pounding. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't born of regret, they were tears of release. For the first time, I had spoken every truth, claimed my power, and broken free from their control. And with that door closed, I knew I had entered a new chapter, one where I stood only on my own, leaving no space for the Carter family's poison. I thought the story ended when that door slammed shut. But I underestimated Sophia. She had never accepted failure, least of all failure at my hands. The sister she had been taught all her life was beneath her, useless. A few days after that confrontation, the storm truly began. And this time, it wouldn't be confined to four walls, it would spill out under the eyes of millions of strangers. One Monday morning, just as I arrived at the Green Path office, my assistant came rushing in with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Rachel, You need to see this right now. On the screen was a Facebook post from Sophia's own account. A long, emotional caption stretched across the page, paired with old family photos. In it, she spun an entirely different story. That our frail, aging parents had been cruelly turned away by me, that when they came to my door I had heartlessly thrown them out into the storm. She painted me as a cold-blooded woman who valued money over family, who ignored the desperate pleas of her little sister asking for forgiveness. The post ended with a line dripping in sentiment. Sometimes, success makes people forget their roots. Family is supposed to be everything, but to my sister, it's only a burden. Reading it, I wanted to laugh and scream all at once. The story was twisted beyond recognition, turning me into a monster. Within hours, the post had tens of thousands of shares and hundreds of furious comments. Ungrateful brat. What kind of child would be so cruel? Raised by parents only to betray them like this? The accusations piled up, each one like another knife to the chest. My hands shook as I scrolled, frozen in place, feeling as though the air had been punched out of me. But Sophia wasn't finished. On Reddit, a new account clearly hers posted a long novel-like tale under Redditfamily drama. This time, the story was told from the perspective of the helpless younger sister. She cast herself as the victim, while I was the ruthless success story, the heartless entrepreneur who used my company and wealth to trample over my family. Because Reddit is notorious for rallying fiercely against stories of injustice, the post shot to the top. Thousands of comments poured in, cursing me with the ugliest words imaginable. I had never felt the world turn its back so quickly. From a young entrepreneur admired by many, I had become, in a single night, a symbol of ingratitude. Every time I opened my phone, there were insults waiting, hateful messages, threatening emails. Some people even tracked down the address of my company, sending handwritten letters scrawled with warnings. You will pay. I was shaken, overwhelmed, but the deepest cut of all was watching the fallout reach green path, the child I had built with my own blood and tears. A major client called me, his voice hesitant. Rachel, we've seen what's been spreading online. I don't know what to believe, but our company doesn't want to get dragged into controversy. We'll have to suspend our contract. After that call, 2 more contracts were canceled. The numbers on our financial board began to plummet. I looked at my team, the people who had trusted me from the very beginning, and I felt as though I was betraying them. They didn't say a word, but the worry in their eyes was impossible to hide. Every morning when I walked into the office, I felt the weight of skeptical glances. Local newspapers started running sensational headlines like, Boston CEO accused of abandoning elderly parents. I became a talking point in coffee shops, on radio shows, and in streams of vicious online comments. The crowd didn't know the truth, and they didn't care to. For them, Sophia's sentimental story was far easier to swallow than the messy, complicated reality. At night I lay in bed, my phone buzzing endlessly with new notifications. Every time I opened it, another storm of hatred poured out. Trash. You don't deserve to be human. Hope your company goes bankrupt. I clutched my head, tears soaking my pillow. I felt like I was drowning in a public trial where justice was defined not by facts but by shares and furious comments. People called it social justice, but to me, it was nothing more than a mob with torches, ready to burn down anyone they decided was a monster. The world didn't know that I once knocked on doors begging for a little love and was turned away. No one knew my father once stood in front of our relatives and called my career a filthy job. No one heard him shouting, "You're just a failure we picked up." All they saw was Sophia crying, weaving her tale, and they were eager to believe it. In those days, I had to learn silence. Every rebuttal was twisted, every attempt to explain only fueled the mob's rage. I watched green paths stumble, contracts slipping away, finances tightening. I watched my employees struggle to stay focused in an atmosphere so heavy it was hard to breathe. And for the first time since founding my company, I felt real fear, not of business failure, but of losing everything to the lies of my own family. I remember sitting alone in my office late at night, the yellow lamp casting its glow over the stacks of papers on my desk. In my hand was a printed copy of Sophia's post, every word etched like a scar. I asked myself, why does she hate me so much? Why does my family not only want me to fail in their eyes but also drag me down before the whole world? What she had done wasn't just an attack on my personal reputation, it was a direct threat to the survival of GreenPath, the company I had poured nearly all of my youth into building. I needed a clear, legal, and powerful way to fight back. And the first name that came to my mind was Rachel Kim, a college friend who had since become a lawyer, specializing in business and media law. The last time I had seen Rachel Kim was at an environmental conference a few years back. At that time, she had just joined a major Boston law firm, well known for defending small businesses against defamation and unfair competition. I still remembered her joking, "If anyone ever tries to make up lies to destroy your company, just call me." I had laughed then, never imagining those words would one day become my lifeline. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling with both anger and desperation. The moment I heard her voice on the other end, I almost broke down. I told her everything: the Facebook post, the Reddit story, the canceled contracts, the threats. I even told her how my parents had stood by Sophia's side, silently allowing her to spread her lies. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. Then Rachel Kim's voice came, firm and steady. "This is a textbook defamation case, Rachel, and we're going to fight." The very next day, I was sitting in her office, the polished wooden desk covered in documents. Rachel Kim explained everything carefully. Under Massachusetts law, any false statement that damages a person's reputation and financial stability can be grounds for defamation. She pointed out the phrases in Sophia's post: "Rachel abandoned her elderly parents," "Rachel threw her crying sister into the street," that were clearly fabricated. More importantly, those statements had directly caused GreenPath to lose contracts and suffer financial harm, something we could prove with numbers. I handed Rachel Kim the emails from clients canceling their contracts, their revenue reports showing the sudden drop right after Sophia's post went viral. I gave her printed screenshots from social media, thousands of hateful comments, and even the threatening letters sent to GreenPath. Looking over the pile of evidence, Rachel Kim nodded firmly. "We have everything we need. Sophia will pay for this." Just a few weeks later, the official lawsuit was filed in Boston court. The news spread quickly in the opposite direction. GreenPath CEO sues younger sister for defamation. The press jumped on it again, but this time with a different tone. Some began to ask questions. Had Sophia really fabricated the story? The internet was divided, but at least I was no longer a silent target absorbing every accusation alone. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with a heavy heart. My parents sat in the back row, their faces tense, but not a single word of greeting. Sophia wore a plain black dress, her hair loose, her makeup soft-crafted carefully to look like a victim. But I knew that beneath the fragile image was cold calculation. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had merely been expressing personal feelings, that her posts were nothing more than subjective experiences. But when Rachel Kim presented the evidence emails from clients stating they did not want to be associated with Rachel Carter's family scandal, financial reports showing losses matching the timeline of Sophia's posts, and excerpts where Sophia had written her claims as if they were undeniable facts, the defense crumbled quickly. I still remember the moment Rachel Kim rose to her feet, her voice ringing sharp and steady through the courtroom. "Your Honor, this is not a private confession. These are public statements, false statements, read by millions, which have caused severe damage to a legitimate business. My client has not only been defamed but has suffered measurable financial losses. This is defamation, plain and clear." Sophia bowed her head, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. My father stared at the floor, my mother exhaled heavily, unable to meet my eyes. I sat there trembling inside, but also filled with pride. For years, I had been forced into silence against injustice. But this time, I had a voice. When the judge delivered the verdict, the words rang like a bell of release. The defendant, Sophia Carter, is found guilty of defamation. She is ordered to pay the plaintiff, Rachel Carter, $250,000 in damages, including financial losses and emotional distress. The room erupted. Sophia broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, while my father shot to his feet, his face red with humiliation. The Carter family, a name once associated with prestige and elegance, was now a public spectacle. Headlines flashed across the media. Youngest Carter daughter loses defamation case, ordered to pay sister. Pictures of Sophia leaving court with swollen eyes flooded the internet. And for the first time, I saw the comments begin to shift. Maybe we were wrong to believe Sophia. Turns out Rachel was the real victim. Greenpath slowly began to recover. Some clients returned, and even new partners reached out, saying they admired me for having the courage to stand up for the truth. But for the Carter family, the stain would never wash away. $250,000 wasn't a devastating amount for a hotel chain, but the real loss was their dignity, the image of a distinguished family they had spent decades building. That evening, when I returned to my apartment and sat quietly by the window, I felt both relief and sorrow. I had won, but the victory wasn't sweet. Somewhere deep inside, I had still hoped my family might change, might finally understand me. But reality proved otherwise. They only recognized my worth when they were forced to pay the price. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning. I will never let them define me again." And I knew, after this trial, the Carters would only sink deeper. What followed was nothing short of an earthquake for the Carter family. News of Sophia losing the case and being ordered to compensate me spread across Boston and New England. The press, once eager to praise Carter hotels, the symbol of luxury, now splashed headlines dripping with irony. From prestige to scandal, the Carters collapse under their own weight. Images of my parents leaving court, faces hollow and broken, Sophia wailing in her lawyer's arms, flooded social media as objects of ridicule. Gossip swirled endlessly, and for the first time, the Carter name no longer meant glamour but failure and greed. Soon, the rumors became reality. To pay the damages and keep cash flow alive, my parents were forced to sell off part of the hotel chain. One of the oldest hotels in Rhode Island, the very heart of the brand, was sold to a real estate conglomerate. The news sent shockwaves through the extended family, the same distant relatives who once fawned over them, now turning away. Loyal customers withdrew, and many longtime employees resigned. My parents, once standing tall at charity galas, adored by society, were reduced to mockery. I watched it all unfold from a distance, wrapped in a strange silence. I didn't feel joy, and I didn't feel vindication. I only felt emptiness. Perhaps because I had seen this ending coming for years. A family built on favoritism and arrogance was bound to collapse sooner or later. The trial had only been the final nail in the coffin. One winter morning, as Boston lay under a blanket of icy fog, I heard a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I saw my mother. She no longer looked like the elegant Mrs. Carter. Her face was gaunt, her hair streaked with gray and unkempt. Her eyes were sunken, ringed dark from sleepless nights. In her hand was a worn, shabby purse, nothing like the designer bags I had grown up seeing her carry. "Rachel." My mother's voice trembled. "Your father, he's in the hospital. His heart gave out after these stressful months. The doctors say he needs an emergency surgery, about $20,000. Can you help? No matter what, he's still your father." I stood there, staring at her as if she were a stranger. In that instant, memories surged back, the times I had begged for a few $1,000s to stay in school and been refused, the mocking words that my career was filthy, the family gatherings where I was isolated in plain sight. I remembered that night my father shouted in my face, "You're nothing but a failure we picked up. Without this family, you'd be nothing." And now, here they were, standing at my door, begging for every dollar to salvage their pride and his life. Inside me, there was no hatred left, but there was no love either, only a hollow, frozen emptiness. I exhaled slowly and spoke with deliberate calm. "The day you chose Sophia over me, The day father stood before our relatives and declared I was no longer part of this family, that was the day you both lost me. Now, if you need money, sell the multi-million-dollar house you've kept for Sophia. She's the child you always trusted. My mother froze, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. She tried to speak but choked on the words, her eyes pleading with a despair I couldn't meet. I didn't wait another second. Gently but firmly, I closed the door. The sound of the lock clicked sharp and final, sealing off the last thread of hope. As I turned back into my apartment, my shoulders felt suddenly light. Not because I took joy in refusing to help my father, but because I had finally placed a period at the end of a long, painful chapter. I was no longer the girl who once craved recognition. I had chosen my new family, friends, colleagues, people who valued me for who I truly was. The Carter family, with its false glitter and warped affection, was now nothing but the past. And this time, the door I closed was closed forever. When everything was over, I sat alone in my small Boston apartment, watching the morning light spill through the glass. I thought about all that had passed, a childhood spent in the shadow of contempt, the dream of education I once had to abandon, the nights I scrubbed floors in chemical fumes, the company I built from nothing, and the battles I had fought against my own blood. I had endured enough bitterness to understand one simple truth, one that is never easy to accept. Family is not where you are born, but where you are respected. Blood cannot excuse cruelty. It cannot be the chain that binds you to lifelong submission. I know there are many people like me, those who have been rejected, pushed aside, simply because they did not fit into the mold their parents had created for them. I want to tell you this, being rejected does not mean you are worthless. Your worth does not depend on someone else's gaze, and it certainly does not depend on the approval of a family warped by favoritism. It lives in your own actions, your own effort, and the choices you make every single day. I was once called the daughter chasing a filthy career, yet that very career gave me independence, dignity, and a community that truly values me. I also want to emphasize something it took me nearly all of my youth to learn. Setting boundaries with a toxic family is not selfish, it is survival. Many believe that cutting ties or refusing your parents is a sin. But the real sin is allowing yourself to continue being trampled, exploited, and broken in silence. When I dared to close the door on my parents, it was not an act of hatred, it was an act of protection. Protection from the endless cycle of old wounds repeating themselves. Today, I have built for myself a new family. Not from blood, but from trust and respect. They are my colleagues at GreenPath, who worked with me through freezing winter nights. They are the young employees I hired when no one else would give them a chance. They are the friends who did not turn away when the internet overflowed with lies, but instead stood beside me and affirmed their belief in who I am. They have become my foundation, the place where I have found comfort and love that is genuine. And if you listening to my story have ever been belittled by your family, ever felt lost in the very home that should have sheltered you, remember this. You can leave, and you can rebuild your own worth. Don't let anyone call you useless. Don't let anyone define your life through their favoritism or selfishness. You deserve a place to call family, not because it shares your blood, but because it is where people truly see you and honor you. It took me years to learn this, and I share my story not to complain, but in the hope that you will not have to wander as far as I did to find the truth. If you are hesitating, if you still believe you must endure for the sake of peace, ask yourself, what peace is built on contempt? Sometimes cutting ties is the only path to healing. And when you take that step, you will discover the world is far wider than you ever imagined, and within it, you can begin again, on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you, my dear friends, in the next one.